I'm here with Mike. And I've got a few questions for him about JavaScript and technology in general. The first one is, which JavaScript API do you find to be the coolest, the weirdest, but at the same time the coolest?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I work at Mozilla and I work on web compatibility. And what that means is when web pages don't work in Firefox or other browsers, we try to figure out why. Like what's breaking? Is it the browser that's broken? Is it a web page that's broken? Or are there some kind of web standards problems? And so the question is, which JavaScript API? Like raw JS, I guess standard library JS, we could say, like pretty normal. It's not that weird. But the DOM is where it gets really weird. And so the DOM is document object model. That's how you can use JavaScript to modify a web page, right? You can do all kinds of exciting things. Probably the weirdest and most useful is that,
that would work.
Is there's a couple APIs. One of them is called exec mode, and you can basically it takes two values. It's on or off. It's a string. And so you set this property on whatever element is in your page, and it turns it into a text editor. So kind of like Microsoft Word or whatever. That's really useful if you're like, oh, I need a text editor, because that's a question. It's something we say all the time, right?
Yeah.
Not really, but what's weird about it is it's super terrible. Like it's really inconsistent between browsers. Like depending on what you're trying to do, it'll break in weird ways. So it's like ancient 1998 technology, but it still works in browsers today, and it's kind of cool if you didn't know. Like if you need to hack or tweak a web page and you don't know how to use developer tools or anything, you can flip on exec mode on the document and go to town. So
the next one is JavaScript functional JavaScript or object oriented. And what's your preference and why?
That's a great question. I don't know that I actually have a preference. So I contribute to Firefox, which is a big project. There's like millions of lines of code, and depending on the project you're in different styles, and so you want to adopt to each style that you're working with. Object-oriented programming is great for what you're trying to do. Like if you're actually in a situation where you're going to have lots of objects you can instantiate and inheritance makes sense, like why not? It works. Like it's well understood. Functional programming, I think you can even take a functional style and apply that to whatever you're working with. Like no side effects, consistently return the same thing. Like that's just good advice no matter what you're doing. I'm gonna give a non-answer and say like both are good. I like Coke and Pepsi. So.
Being very diplomatic.
I actually don't like either of those. But,
Well, I was referring to JavaScript and not Coke and Pepsi.
Okay.
All right. The next one. What advice would you give for someone who's a JavaScript developer just entering the market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think the number one thing I would recommend is try to get involved in open source. If you don't have a GitHub account, go create one. It's free, and you can actually there's a number of sites out there that are designed to help you get involved. So I think there's a label that a lot of projects add to their repos. It's called Good First PR. And so if you Google Good First PR, someone made a site and it'll point to all these different entry points. And so just get involved. You can make a really simple change. It might be JavaScript. It might even just be like fixing a typo in some documents. But you're going to learn so much about the way that programmers work, right? You're going to learn. You might have to set up your development environment. You might have to adhere to some conventions. You have to learn some skills in Git. And so just open source is really, it's a great kind of training ground. When we hire on my team, we look at the resume and we do all kinds of other skill things, but we try to look at people's GitHub activity to see some of the code they've written or some of the issues they've opened or helped with. And so it's really illuminating to be involved in that.
All right. Last question is, how do you keep yourself up to date on everything that's happening in this world?
Yeah, it's really hard. Everything moves super fast, right? So you go to a conference and there's like 4 different frameworks, and it's a lot to keep up with. So for me personally, side projects are a way. Like if I want today, we saw a talk yesterday about Vue.js and progressive web apps. Great talk, and it's like, oh, that looks really interesting. I've never used Vue. But I know JavaScript, and so like if you have the fundamentals down, it's not that hard to just kind of grab something, read the docs, make a little toy app, over the weekend or whenever. That's really helpful just to make side projects. One common thing that people do is, have some tool or game that you're familiar with, and just like re-implement that. So you're like, oh, I wrote this tic-tac-toe game in React. Now I'm going to try to write it in Ember, so like you're not solving the problem of how do I learn tic-tac-toe, but you're just kind of figuring out how to make the framework parts work. Definitely like social media is useful. A lot of people tweet about cool things, tweet about lame things as well. There's other sites that are great for that. Like Hacker News has a lot of good articles. You should probably never read the comments, but you can click on the link and go read the article, and that's pretty great. So yeah, I think a combination of following some important developers who know a lot of stuff, and they kind of tweet out cool links, and then also just like having side projects, definitely a great way to learn.
It's great advice. Thanks a lot.